The rain fell hard that night, turning the streets into small rivers and making everything look blurry through the patrol car windshield. Officer James Mercer rubbed his tired eyes as he checked the time on the dashboard. 11:43 p.m., just 17 more minutes until his shift ended. The thought of his warm bed waiting at home made him press a little harder on the gas pedal. James had been a cop in this small town for nearly 8 years now. He knew these streets like the back of his hand, especially this part of town where the streetlights were often broken and the houses needed serious repair. Tonight, the heavy rain made everything look even more run down than usual. His radio crackled with static, but no calls came through. It had been a quiet night, which was rare but welcome. James turned down Pine Street, taking his usual route back to the station when something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a shadow moving against the rain, but as he slowed down, his headlights revealed a small figure walking slowly along the sidewalk. What in the world? James muttered to himself, squinting through the rain-streaked window. It was a kid, a young boy completely soaked, his clothes sticking to his thin frame. But what made James immediately pull over was that the boy wasn't alone. He was carrying someone on his back, a smaller child wrapped in what looked like a thin blanket. James flipped on his emergency lights and parked the car. He grabbed his flashlight and raincoat, then stepped out into the downpour. The rain immediately hammered against his coat so loud he could barely hear himself think. "Hey there," he called out, approaching slowly so as not to scare the boy. The kid froze like a deer caught in headlights. He tightened his grip on the child he was carrying and took a half step backward. His face, dripping with rainwater, showed a mix of exhaustion and fear. James held up his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "It's okay, buddy. I just want to make sure you're all right. It's pretty late to be out in this storm." The boy didn't run, which James took as a good sign. As he got closer, he could see the boy was probably around 11 or 12 years old. His sneakers were soaked through, his jeans were muddy up to the knees, and his hair was plastered to his forehead. The child on his back appeared to be a little girl, maybe 6 or 7. "My name's Officer Mercer, but you can call me James," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, water dripping from his chin as he studied the police officer. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible above the rain. "I'm Ethan." "Hi, Ethan. Who's that you're carrying?" "My sister," Ethan replied, shifting, her weight on his back. "Her name's Maya." James noticed how the boy's arms were trembling from the effort of carrying his sister for what must have been quite some time. The girl's face was partly visible now, her eyes closed, cheeks flushed despite the cold rain. "Is she okay?" James asked, concern growing in his chest. Ethan shook his head. "She's sick. Real sick. Got a bad fever since yesterday. I'm taking her to the hospital." James's eyes widened. The nearest hospital was at least 3 miles away. "How long have you been walking, Ethan?" The boy glanced down at his muddy shoes. "Don't know exactly. Left home when it was still dark out." James felt something twist in his stomach. This kid had been carrying his sister through the pouring rain for hours. "Where are your parents?" he asked carefully. "Mom's at work. She works nights cleaning offices. Won't be home till morning." Ethan adjusted his sister again, his skinny arms clearly struggling with her weight. "Dad's not around." James stepped closer, noticing how Maya's breathing seemed labored. He reached out slowly and placed the back of his hand against the little girl's forehead. She was burning up. "Ethan, I think we need to get your sister to the hospital right away. Would it be okay if I gave you both a ride in my patrol car?" Relief washed over the boy's face, but he still looked uncertain. "You're not going to take us somewhere else? Like to those people who take kids away from their families?" The question broke James's heart a little. "No, buddy. I promise we're going straight to the hospital to get help for Maya. Then we'll figure everything out, okay?" Ethan nodded slowly, the exhaustion evident on his young face. "Can I help you carry her to the car?" James asked. Ethan hesitated, then nodded again. James carefully took the little girl into his arms, shocked at how hot her skin felt even through the damp blanket. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused and glassy with fever. "It's okay, Maya," James said softly. "We're going to get you some help." He rushed them back to his patrol car, gently placing Maya in the back seat while Ethan climbed in beside her, unwilling to leave his sister's side. James cranked up the heat to warm the shivering children. As he pulled away from the curb, James glanced in his rearview mirror. Ethan had placed his sister's head on his lap and was gently stroking her hair, whispering something James couldn't hear. The sight made his throat tighten. "The hospital's not far," James said, flipping on his sirens. "We'll be there in just a few minutes." Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting James's in the mirror. "Thank you, sir." "How long has your sister been sick?" James asked as he navigated the rain-slicked streets, driving as fast as he safely could. "Started coughing real bad 2 days ago," Ethan explained. "Mom gave her some medicine before she left for work, but it didn't help much. Then tonight she got real hot and started breathing funny. I couldn't wake her up proper." His voice cracked, slightly. "I tried calling Mom, but our phone got cut off last week. I didn't know what else to do." James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. This young boy had been faced with an impossible situation and had made the brave decision to carry his sister through a stormy night to find help. How many adults would have shown such courage? "You did the right thing, Ethan," James said firmly. "You're being incredibly brave." As they pulled up to the emergency entrance of the hospital, James radioed ahead so the staff would be ready. Lights from the hospital entrance spilled out onto the wet pavement, promising help and warmth inside. James didn't know it yet, but this rainy night encounter was about to change not just his life, but the lives of these children forever. And it was only the beginning of a story that would eventually touch the entire community. The automatic doors of the emergency room slid open as Officer James rushed in, carrying little Maya in his arms. Ethan ran alongside them, his wet sneakers squeaking against the polished hospital floor. The bright lights of the hospital made both children squint after hours in the darkness. "I need some help here," James called out, his voice echoing in the waiting area. A nurse with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun looked up from her desk. In an instant, she was on her feet and rushing toward them. "What happened?" she asked, already checking Maya's pulse and feeling her forehead. "High fever, trouble breathing," James explained quickly. "Her brother found her like this and was carrying her to the hospital when I spotted them." The nurse, whose name tag read Nancy, signaled to another staff member who quickly brought over a wheelchair. James gently placed Maya in it, her small body looking even tinier against the large chair. Her eyes remained closed, her breathing shallow and raspy. "How long has she been like this?" Nancy asked, looking at Ethan. The boy stood there dripping water onto the floor, his arms now empty without his sister's weight. His shoulders slumped with exhaustion, but his eyes never left Maya. "She started coughing real bad 2 days ago," Ethan said, repeating what he'd told Officer James. "Then tonight her skin got super hot and she couldn't really wake up properly." Nancy nodded and turned to her colleague. "Let's get her into exam room 3 right away. Call Dr. Chen." As they began to wheel Maya away, Ethan darted forward and grabbed his sister's hand. "Wait, can I go with her?" Nancy hesitated, then her face softened. "We need to examine her first, honey. You can see her very soon, I promise. Right now, you look like you could use some dry clothes and maybe some hot chocolate." Ethan reluctantly let go of Maya's hand, watching as they wheeled her through a set of double doors. His bottom lip trembled slightly, but he fought back tears. James placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "She's in good hands now, Ethan. The doctors here know exactly what to do." A younger nurse approached with a bundle of dry clothes. "These might be a bit big, but they're better than staying in those wet ones. You can change in that bathroom over there." Ethan looked at the clothes, then at Officer James, seemingly unsure. "Go ahead," James encouraged. "I'll be right here when you come out, I promise." While Ethan changed, James called the station to let them know he would be staying past his shift. He then tried the number Ethan had given him for their mother, but as the boy had said, the line was disconnected. James rubbed the back of his neck, worry lines deepening on his forehead. When Ethan emerged from the bathroom, he was swimming in a set of light blue scrubs that had been rolled up at the ankles and wrists. His wet hair had been towel-dried, sticking up in odd places. He looked even younger now, his face pale with exhaustion. "Any news about Maya?" were his first words. "Not yet," James replied honestly. "But that's normal. The doctors need time to check her properly." A hospital volunteer had brought 2 cups of hot chocolate and some graham crackers. James led Ethan to a quiet corner of the waiting room where they could sit and wait. For a while, Ethan just held the warm cup in his hands, staring at the double doors where Maya had disappeared. Finally, he took a small sip. "This is really good," he said quietly. James nodded. Hospital hot chocolate, one of the world's best-kept secrets. That earned him a tiny smile from Ethan, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "Can I ask you some questions, Ethan, to help me understand your situation better?" Ethan shrugged, which James took as permission. "You mentioned your mom works nights. Where exactly does she work?" "She cleans office buildings downtown," Ethan replied, breaking a graham cracker into tiny pieces. "Big tall ones with lots of windows. She works for a cleaning company. Sometimes she doesn't get home until real early in the morning, like 6 o'clock. And during the day? She works at Sunnyside Diner, serving food and stuff." Ethan's voice carried a note of pride. "She works really hard." James nodded. "Sounds like it. And it's just you, Maya, and your mom at home?" Ethan nodded. "Dad left when Maya was just a baby. Mom says he's in Arizona now with his new family." The matter-of-fact way Ethan delivered this information made James's heart ache. No anger, no sadness, just stating how things were. "Does your mom know you're here?" Ethan shook his head. "I left her a note on the kitchen table, but I don't know if she'll see it before she gets home from work." "What time does her shift end?" 5 in the morning. James checked his watch. It was just past midnight now, nearly 5 more hours before their mother would even know her children were missing. "You did a brave thing tonight, Ethan," James said softly. "Carrying your sister. All that way in the rain. That couldn't have been easy." Ethan looked down at his hands. "She's my little sister. Mom always says we have to look out for each other." He paused, then added, "I was scared she was going to die." The raw honesty in his voice made James swallow hard. "Well, thanks to you, she's getting help now. That's what matters." Dr. Chen, a woman with short black hair and rectangular glasses, pushed through the double doors and approached them. Ethan immediately stood up, his hot chocolate forgotten. "Are you Maya's family?" she asked. "I'm her brother," Ethan said, his voice suddenly stronger. "Is she okay?" Dr. Chen sat down at their level, which James appreciated. Too many doctors talk down to children. "Maya has pneumonia, a serious infection in her lungs," she explained gently. "Her fever is very high and she's having trouble breathing on her own right now. We've started her on strong antibiotics and put her on oxygen to help her breathe better. But she's going to be okay, right?" Ethan's voice cracked slightly. The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're doing everything we can. The good news is that you got her here in time. If she had waited much longer..." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Ethan had saved his sister's life. "Can I see her?" Ethan asked. "Yes, but only for a few minutes. She needs to rest." As Dr. Chen led them through the hospital corridors to the pediatric unit, James watched Ethan walking slightly ahead, his back straight, despite his obvious exhaustion. The borrowed scrubs made him look like a miniature doctor himself. James didn't know what would happen next with these kids, but one thing was clear. There was more to this story than a boy and his sick sister caught in the rain. Much more. And somehow James knew his involvement wouldn't end when his shift did. Maya looked so small in the hospital bed. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped steadily, monitoring her every breath. Her usually rosy cheeks were pale except for 2 bright fever spots. An oxygen mask covered half her face, fogging up slightly with each labored breath she took. Ethan stood at the edge of the bed, his fingers barely touching his sister's hand, as if afraid he might hurt her. Officer James watched from the doorway, giving the boy a moment with Maya. "Hey, Maya," Ethan whispered. "The doctors are helping you get better. I'm right here." His voice trembled slightly, but he kept talking. "Remember how you always wanted to ride in a police car? Well, we did that tonight. Officer James brought us here in his car. It had those flashing lights and everything." James felt his throat tighten as he watched this boy, who couldn't be older than 12, speaking so gently to his little sister. Dr. Chen checked Maya's IV line. "The antibiotics will need some time to work. Her fever is still high, but she's stable." She turned to Ethan with a kind smile. "You should be proud. Most adults wouldn't have known what to do in your situation." Ethan just nodded, his eyes never leaving his sister's face. "We need to let her rest now," Dr. Chen said softly. "You can see her again in the morning." "But what if she wakes up and I'm not here?" Ethan asked, panic edging into his voice. "She gets scared in new places." Dr. Chen glanced at James, then back to Ethan. "I understand, but you need rest too." "Can't I just stay in this chair?" Ethan pointed to the recliner in the corner of the room. "I promise I won't make any noise." Before Dr. Chen could answer, a commotion erupted in the hallway. A woman's frantic voice rose above the usual hospital sounds. "My children, where are my children? Someone called me about my kids." Ethan's head shot up. "Mom!" He darted past James and into the hallway. James followed quickly, just in time to see Ethan throw himself into the arms of a thin woman with dark circles under her eyes and hair hastily pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore a cleaner's uniform with a name tag that read, "Jessica." "Ethan, oh my God, Ethan." She hugged him fiercely, then pulled back to look at him. "Are you okay? Where's Maya?" "They called me at work and said Maya was in the hospital, but they wouldn't tell me what happened over the phone," and her words tumbled out in a rush until she spotted James standing nearby in his police uniform. Her face drained of color. "Officer," she said, straightening up and keeping a protective arm around Ethan. "I can explain everything. I'm a good mother. I just—" "Mom," Ethan cut in. "Officer James helped us. Maya got really sick and I tried to carry her to the hospital, but he found us in the rain and brought us here in his police car." Jessica looked from her son to James, confusion and fear playing across her exhausted face. "Mrs. James began. "Ms. Wilson," she corrected quietly. "Jessica Wilson." "Ms. Wilson," James nodded. "Your son is quite remarkable. He likely saved your daughter's life tonight." Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes. "Where is she? Can I see her?" Dr. Chen stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Chen. Your daughter has severe pneumonia. We've started her on antibiotics and respiratory support. You can see her, but she's sleeping now." Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. "Pneumonia? But she just had a cold a few days ago." "It can progress quickly in children," Dr. Chen explained gently. "Let me take you to her room." As Jessica followed the doctor, still holding Ethan's hand tightly, James decided to hang back. This was a family moment. But before they turned the corner, Jessica paused and looked back at him. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for helping my children." James nodded. "Just doing my job, ma'am." It was nearly 2 hours later when James, who had been catching up on paperwork in the waiting area, looked up to see Jessica walking toward him. She had clearly been crying, but there was a determined set to her jaw now. "The nurse said you've been here this whole time," she said, sitting in the chair next to him. "You're off duty, aren't you?" James nodded. "I wanted to make sure everything turned out okay." Jessica twisted her hands in her lap. "Maya's fever is starting to come down. They say that's a good sign." She took a deep breath. Ethan finally fell asleep in the chair next to her bed. He refused to leave her side. "He's a brave kid." "Too brave," Jessica whispered. "No child should have to be that brave." She stared at her worn hands for a long moment before speaking again. "I know what you must think of me. Leaving my children alone at night while I work. Maya getting so sick." Her voice broke slightly. "I don't think anything, Ms. Wilson," James said, carefully. Except that you're clearly working very hard to support your family. 2 jobs and it's still not enough, she said, a bitter edge to her voice. Our heat got shut off last week because I had to choose between that and rent. That's probably why Maya got sick. She looked up at James, fierce pride in her tired eyes. I've applied for assistance 3 times. Got denied each time because I make just over the limit. Just over. James felt a heaviness settle in his chest. He'd seen this story before. Hard-working people caught in an impossible system, trying to do everything right and still falling through the cracks. What about Maya and Ethan's father? He asked gently. Jessica's laugh held no humor. Moved to Arizona 4 years ago. Promised to send money for the kids. I've seen 2 checks in 4 years. She shook her head. I don't even bother chasing him anymore. Just means less disappointment for the kids. James nodded, understanding more clearly now. A single mother working around the clock, no support system, no safety net. Is there anyone who can help you? Family nearby? My mother watches the kids when she can, but she's not well herself. Jessica straightened her shoulders. We manage. We always have. Until tonight, James said quietly. Jessica's composure cracked. Just for a moment. I never thought... She swallowed hard. When I got that call, I thought I'd lost them. I thought they were gone. But they're not, James reminded her gently. They're here, they're safe, and Maya's getting the care she needs. And tomorrow? Jessica asked, her voice barely audible. What about when the hospital bills come? What about when I can't take time off work without losing my job, but Maya needs someone at home while she recovers? The questions hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of a reality James had never had to face himself. He didn't have easy answers, but sitting there in that hospital waiting room with the fluorescent lights humming overhead and the faint sounds of medical equipment beeping in the distance, Officer James Mercer made a decision. This wouldn't be just another call, just another report to file and forget. These people, this small, fierce family fighting so hard just to stay afloat, they deserved better. And maybe, just maybe, he could help them find it. 3 days passed. Maya's condition improved enough that the doctor started talking about sending her home soon. The fever had broken, and though she was still weak, her breathing had become much easier. Officer James had stopped by the hospital each day after his shift, sometimes bringing small treats for Ethan, who rarely left his sister's side. On this visit, James found Ethan sitting on the edge of Maya's bed, teaching her how to play a card game with a deck one of the nurses had given him. Maya's dark hair was messy against the pillow, but her eyes were bright and alert now. When she laughed at something Ethan said, James felt a warmth spread through his chest. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh. Officer James, Maya called, out when she spotted him in the doorway. Her voice was still raspy, but much stronger than yesterday. Ethan turned and gave a small wave. Hey. Look at you, James said to Maya, walking into the room. You're looking a whole lot better today. The doctor says I can go home tomorrow, Maya told him proudly. That's great news. James set down a small paper bag on the bedside table. I brought some cookies from Mrs. Lee's bakery downtown. They're the best in town? Maya's eyes lit up, but then her face fell slightly. Mom says we have to be careful with money right now, because of the hospital bills. James felt his smile falter. He'd been thinking about that very issue on his drive over. Jessica had been splitting her time between the hospital and work, catching naps in the chair beside Maya's bed whenever possible. The dark circles under her eyes had only gotten deeper. Don't worry about that right now, James said gently. These cookies are a gift. That means they're free. This seemed to satisfy Maya, who reached eagerly for the bag. Ethan gave James a look that seemed too knowing for a child his age, a look that said he understood exactly what his sister didn't. A soft knock at the door made them all turn. Jessica stood there, still in her diner uniform, her name tag slightly crooked. She looked exhausted but smiled when she saw her children happy. Officer Mercer. She nodded. You're becoming a regular around here. Just checking in, James replied with a smile. And please call me James. Jessica came in and sat down heavily in the chair by the window. The doctor says Maya can come home tomorrow. I heard. That's wonderful news. Yeah, Jessica said, but her tone didn't match her words. Wonderful. Ethan caught the note in his mother's voice too. I can help take care of Maya at home, Mom. You don't have to worry. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly and forced a smile. I know you will, honey. You always do. She stood up suddenly. Maya, why don't you show Ethan how good you're getting at walking to the bathroom on your own? The nurse said practice is important. Maya nodded seriously and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Ethan immediately stood ready to help her. Once the children were out of earshot, Jessica turned to James. I got fired from the diner today, she said quietly. I missed too many shifts this week because of Maya. They said they needed someone reliable. James felt a surge of anger. That's not right, your child was seriously ill. Jessica gave a tired shrug. That's life when you're living on the edge. No safety nets. She rubbed her temples. I still have the night job cleaning offices, but it's not enough for rent, bills, and now this hospital stay. There must be some assistance programs. I've tried, Jessica cut in. I don't qualify for most, and the waiting list for the others are months long. She stared out the window at the cloudy sky. They're sending Maya home with prescriptions I can't afford and instructions for care I can't provide because I have to work. The defeat in her voice hit James like a physical blow. This woman had been fighting an uphill battle for so long, and just when things couldn't get worse, they had. Let me make some calls, James said suddenly. I know people who might be able to help. Jessica shook her head. We don't need charity. It's not charity, James replied firmly. It's community. Sometimes people need a hand up. He paused, then added more softly. Like when someone finds a boy carrying his sister through the rain. The memory hung between them for a moment. Finally, Jessica nodded, just once, but it was enough. Later that evening, after Jessica had left, for her night shift and the children were asleep in Maya's hospital room, James sat in his car in the hospital parking lot, making phone call after phone call. First to Tom Wilson, no relation to Jessica, who ran the community outreach program at James's church. Then to Linda from social services, who owed him a favor from way back. Next was Pat, his sister-in-law, who worked as a nurse practitioner at a clinic that offered sliding scale payments. And finally, to his old high school buddy Carl, who now managed apartment buildings on the better side of town. Each call started the same way. I need your help with something important, and ended with a promise to do whatever was possible. By the time James started his car to head home, it was nearly midnight, but for the first time since finding Ethan and Maya in the rain, he felt a genuine sense of hope. The next morning, James arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. He found Jessica completing Maya's discharge paperwork, her expression tight with worry. Ms. Wilson, he said, trying to contain his excitement. Could I talk to you for a moment in private? Jessica looked surprised but nodded. They stepped into an empty waiting area nearby. I made some calls last night, James began, pulling out a small notebook. And I think we found some solutions. Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly. What kind of solutions? First, the hospital has a financial assistance program. Linda from social services is fast-tracking your application. Based on your situation, she thinks most of Maya's bills will be covered. Jessica's mouth fell open slightly. But I already tried. Sometimes it helps to have someone who knows the system, James explained. Second, the community outreach program at my church has emergency funds for families in crisis. They'll cover your medications and help with utility bills to get your heat turned back on. I can't accept. They help a dozen families every month, James cut in gently. This is exactly what those funds are for. Jessica fell silent, her eyes searching his face. And lastly, James continued, Carl Hannigan owns some apartment buildings across town. One of his tenants just moved out of a ground-floor 2-bedroom. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm, safe, and the rent is within what you can afford with just the night job while you look for something else. A single tear slid down Jessica's cheek. "Why are you doing all this? You don't even know us." James thought about that rainy night, about Ethan's determined face as he carried his sister through the darkness, about Maya's quiet trust in her brother, about Jessica working 2 jobs and still falling short. "Because sometimes the system fails good people," he said simply. "And when that happens, other people need to step up." Jessica wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. For the first time since James had met her, her shoulders weren't hunched with worry. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what else to say." James smiled. "You don't need to say anything. Just focus on getting Maya better and finding a job you deserve." He checked his watch. "Now, let's get those kids home, shall we?" As they walked back toward Maya's room, James realized something important. This wasn't just about helping one family through a tough time. This was about building a bridge between parts of the community that rarely connected, between those who had resources and those who needed them. And sometimes all it took was one person willing to be that bridge. 6 months passed in the blink of an eye. Spring rain gave way to summer sunshine, and now the leaves were starting to change color as fall settled over the town. Officer James pulled his patrol car up to a small apartment building with freshly painted green shutters. He checked his watch, right on time. This wasn't an official visit. These stops had become part of his regular routine on Saturdays when he wasn't on duty. Before he could even knock, the door flew open, and Maya stood, there beaming, her dark hair pulled back in 2 neat braids. "Officer James, you're here." She grabbed his hand and pulled him inside. "Mom made cookies, real ones, not from the store." James laughed as he let himself be dragged into the cozy apartment. The place wasn't fancy, but it was warm and clean, with secondhand furniture that had been carefully arranged to make the small space feel like a real home. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator, and a small bookshelf in the corner was filled with library books. Jessica appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her face had filled out a bit in the past months, and the permanent worry lines around her eyes had softened. She wore a navy blue uniform with a local hospital logo stitched on the pocket. "Right on time," she said with a smile. "Ethan will be back any minute. He's helping Mr. Parker from downstairs carry in his groceries." James nodded, not surprised. That was Ethan, always ready to help someone who needed it. "How's the new job?" James asked, accepting the cup of coffee Jessica offered him. "Honestly, it's amazing," Jessica replied, her eyes bright with genuine happiness. "The hospital administration position is perfect. Regular hours, good benefits, and I'm home every evening with the kids." She shook her head slightly. "I still can't believe Pat thought of me when the position opened up." James smiled. His sister-in-law had kept her promise to let him know when something suitable became available at the clinic where she worked. Jessica, with her years of juggling jobs and paperwork and schedules, had turned out to be exactly what they needed. "And the best part," Jessica continued, lowering her voice so Maya, who was arranging cookies on a plate, couldn't hear, "is that they have a tuition assistance program. I've started taking night classes in healthcare management. Just 1 class at a time, but still." "That's wonderful," James said, meaning it. Each small step forward this family took filled him with a sense of satisfaction that was different from anything else in his police work. The front door opened and Ethan walked in. At first glance, James thought the boy had grown 6 inches since that rainy night, but it wasn't just his height. There was something different about the way he carried himself now, still responsible beyond his years, but no longer bearing the weight of the world on his small shoulders. "Hey, Officer James." Ethan greeted him with a genuine smile. "Are you still coming to my school next week?" "Wouldn't miss it," James replied. He had agreed to speak at the school's career day, but Ethan was the one who had arranged it all, proudly introducing him to his teacher as "my friend who's a police officer." As they sat around the small kitchen table eating cookies and talking, James reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The first weeks had been tough. Moving to the new apartment, getting Maya fully recovered, helping Jessica navigate the maze of assistance programs and job applications. None of it had been easy. but small changes had added up. The community center started an after-school program where Ethan and Maya could stay until Jessica finished work. The church outreach program helped with school supplies and winter clothes. James's fellow officers, touched by the story, organized a furniture drive for the family's new apartment. And through it all, Jessica never stopped working toward independence, taking each bit of help not as a handout, but as a stepping stone. Later, as James was preparing to leave, Jessica walked him to his car. "You know," she said quietly, "before all this happened, I used to see police cars in our neighborhood and feel nervous. Not because we were doing anything wrong, but because in my experience, cops showing up usually meant something bad was happening to somebody." James nodded. He'd heard this before and understood it. "I never thought I'd be standing here saying that a police officer changed our lives," Jessica continued. "But you did. Not by doing some huge heroic thing, but by seeing us. Really seeing us, and not just looking away. Your kids are the real heroes of this story," James said, thinking of Ethan trudging through the rain with his sister on his back. "Especially that boy of yours," Jessica smiled. "Speaking of Ethan, he's got something he wants to tell you. He's been waiting for the right time." She called Ethan over from where he was kicking a soccer ball in the small patch of grass beside the building. Ethan jogged over, the ball tucked under his arm. He seemed suddenly nervous, scuffing his sneaker against the pavement. "What's up, buddy?" James asked. Ethan took a deep breath. "I decided what I want to be when I grow up." "Oh yeah?" James smiled. "What's that?" "A police officer," Ethan said, his voice firm and certain. "Like you. Not just to catch bad guys or anything, but to help people who need it. People who might not have anyone else to help them." James felt something catch in his throat. He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, noticing that he didn't have to bend down quite as far to do it as he once had. "The Force would be lucky to have you," he said softly. As James drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror at the small family standing outside their apartment. Maya was waving enthusiastically with both arms while Ethan and Jessica stood, close together, still visible in the fading evening light. His police work had always felt important, but something about this connection, this change that had rippled outward from one rainy night, felt different. It wasn't just about enforcing laws or responding to emergencies. It was about building bridges in a community, about seeing people at their most vulnerable and not looking away. A call came through on his radio. Another emergency, another need. As James turned on his siren and headed toward the new situation, he carried with him the image of Ethan standing tall beside his mother and sister. Sometimes, James thought, the biggest changes start with the smallest moments, like spotting a boy carrying his sister through the rain and deciding to stop, to see, to help. And in those moments, we have the chance to remind each other that, even in the hardest times, we're not alone. That's what community means. That's what it means to truly serve and protect.